ado, I would like to introduce Dave Schlafman. He is a 3-time Emmy-nominated producer, designer, animator, illustrator, you name it. The guy does it all.
So, my name's Dave Schlafman, and as Derek mentioned, he mentioned that I'm a lot of things. I don't really do as much artwork as I used to because now I run a studio called Cloud Kid. However, I get to work with some of the most creative, amazing artists in the world, so I'm really lucky, and I still do get to doodle most of the time. It's in meetings, but it all started at Mass Art. And so it got me thinking about my presentation a little bit, and where Mass Art is this fine educational institution, I'm kind of pulling a bait and switch on you guys. And I am today going to talk about H.H. Richardson, the fine architect. And I think we should first look at his seminal artwork piece, the Trinity Church. I'm just kidding. So today, the title of my talk is One Dude's Humble Perspective on Storytelling, Transmedia, and Interactive Content. And it all began for me in the 1980s because, like all of us, we have these kind of visions of what the 1980s were. Amazing hair, chest hair, clothes. But for me, the 80s were a time of incredible innovation in media and film and all sorts of different areas. And so just growing up, I was so lucky to be able to be inspired by new mediums like the blockbuster films, some of these examples here. Then you have, Michael Jackson's Thriller. The music video became a new genre essentially in the early 80s. I still remember the first time I saw Money for Nothing, and it blew my mind, and I really think a lot of these moments really impacted what I'm doing now. Then you had things like the Nintendo and Super Mario Brothers, and video games were kind of first time where we were getting these giant experiences in all these different types of media. Late 70s, you had Star Wars, Transformers, G.I. Joe, He-Man, but then you started getting people that were starting to put it all together. So you would have the Ghostbusters that had a film, but then they made a cartoon that was totally separate, that had totally different storylines, and then Toyline that was different than both of those, and then a video game that had a different story. And it was this amazing time of real creativity in the 80s that I totally just soaked it all in. And for me, The Simpsons were kind of just changed everything. When I was a big fan as a little kid of Matt Groening, Life is Hell comics, and so once The Simpsons came, they had video games and a TV show, but then they released an album, and then you were kind of saying to yourself, are The Simpsons real? Like, do they really sing and get into a recording booth? And then there was a music video. And then they did something in the early 90s. They started to release comics around Radioactive Man, which was a comic in that world. And just all these pieces of media started kind of compiling on each other and made these worlds seem so much better and cooler than just one TV show or a video game. There were people and producers that started kind of connecting all the dots. And to me, that was really exciting. So for me, I was just a young kid who, this was a science project in 5th grade. But I loved drawing, and so I would draw cartoon characters all the time and write stories to them, and came up with this character in middle school named Naked Boy and wrote all these different stories around him. So it's clear that the 1980s had a profound impact on more than my imagination. So I went off to Mass Art and I studied in the sim program, and why this is important is because when I was in the sim program, the program really preaches, it's a concept-driven major, and so it really talks about finding a concept or a story that you want to tell and then finding the best media to do that. And my business partner, Matt Moore, who's also a Mass Art alumni, we would collaborate on projects all the time together, and I created this fake product called Dynamic DNA that's like you drink it in a can and then you instantly turn skinny. And, so I also did some experimental video and just cartoons because I was also an animation major. And Matt and I started writing, and so we would create pitch Bibles of these worlds. So we created this project called the Happy Crappies, and it had this whole Bible and personalities, and then I was also just doing this on my own and writing stories. This is a story about Easter Island and these imaginary creatures that kind of controlled the island way back millions of years ago. And so this was kind of my first introduction into kind of what I wanted to do as a profession, which became playing. So when I graduated, most people were like, okay, I'm going to go work in graphic design, where I said, okay, I'm going to work at Harmonix. I worked there for 6 months after college, was an animator. And then I got approached by Hasbro Toys, and they're like, do you want to help us redesign the look of Trivial Pursuit for kids? So I worked in toys. And then I took a job at Soup to Nuts Animation Studio and worked on, Word Girl, and directed some shorts for Between the Lions. And directing the shorts was the most exciting thing for me, because it was kind of combining a lot of things that I did. It was design, it was working with other artists, it was coming up with concepts. And this is when I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to just take these ideas and learn how to build them out from nothing, and then be able to communicate that to a team of people to, at the end of the day, when it's on the show, you guys may say, oh, Dave Schlafman did that, but it's not. It's an amazing group of people that get to work with me to make it happen. And so, again, then it was like, okay, I got a call from Penguin. Do you want to illustrate this book series? I had no clue what I was doing, but I was like, sure. So I illustrated a chapter book series for them. And then I directed a PSA. Why am I directing PSAs? I don't know. And like the theme of my talk, part of it is, I didn't take classes to work in video games or toys. I just made it up as I went. And that's part of connecting the dots, which is one of the themes that I'm talking about. So all those different things got me to the point where I was working at a studio with a friend, and he and I, Evan Sussman, who he's my co-creator for Fizzy's Lunch Lab for PBS, we just collaborated, and we used a lot of the skills of directing and a lot of the stuff that I was doing at Mass Art to build this world of characters, and we ended up getting a deal from PBS, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But again, it's about visualizing this world and who the characters are and how it all fits in together, and making that world seem believable, which leads me to my next slide, which is transmedia vomit. And right now, transmedia is a really hot buzzword in the media world, and I don't like the word, because it's kind of like synergy and just, oh, we need some transmedia, get transmedia in there. But it's not that simple. And so I love what transmedia has become, but I think there are better ways to define it, because I think a lot of people still don't really understand what it is. So before I show you some of the stuff that we're doing at CloudKid, I want to just take you through really how I and my colleagues at CloudKid talk about transmedia. So transmedia is not cross-platform. A lot of people think, okay, we're going to make a video game with SpongeBob, and then we're going to do this and that. That's not necessarily transmedia, and I'll give you an example. So Scott Pilgrim versus the World. So line of very successful comic books or graphic novel. So they released a movie, and then they released a video game. But a lot of the stories through each one of those different medias, they're very similar. They touch on the same character, the same themes. It's not that one piece of media is really telling that much of a different story. So it's a really important thing, because this week a really popular video game blog actually blogged about this and how Scott Pilgrim is an amazing piece of transmedia. And the examples I'm going to show you, it's actually not. It's a very successful cross-platform, but I argue that it's not transmedia. So we break it in at CloudKid into two different things: transmedia storytelling, or stories, and transmedia worlds. And I'll give you examples. So storytelling. Okay, The Matrix, everybody knows this is, whenever anybody talks about transmedia, it's like The Matrix, Star Wars. But the reason why this is successful as a transmedia storytelling project is because you had the movies that really told one story, and then they released this thing called the Animatrix, which they hired some of the top animation directors in the world, and each director produced, you know, a 5-minute short that was a story that related to the bigger story, but they were totally new. Like, nobody had ever heard a lot of these stories before. And so it was totally unique, but added to the larger narrative. And then they had the Matrix comics that actually dove into some of the shorts in the Animatrix and went further into those storylines. And again, it's not just retelling the bigger story, it's adding to that world and explaining why that world exists as it does. And so another famous one obviously is Lost. You know, J.J. Abrams, Damon Lindelof put in a lot of other content that you could miss, but it really added to the narrative. And now you're having things like Defiance, which is the sci-fi show that the game is actually new narrative part of the show. So they're really encouraging people. This has been a huge project for NBC and Sci-Fi. You guys should check it out if you haven't. It's very interesting. And then Clone Wars again. So this is telling a really specific storyline in between two of the movies. And again, the transmedia stories are really adding to the larger narrative that we all know, such as Star Wars. So that's kind of the difference. So the next one is world building. And I think what we come to think of as transmedia is more about world building media than storytelling. Though it tells story in a way. So how many of you guys have seen Prometheus? So, very interesting movie. Again, Damon Lindelof, who really loves to play with media and different formats, creator of Lost. So they released on the TED blog, literally on the TED blog, they had a TED Talk by Peter Wayland, who was the founder of this company that, you know, that ends up funding the trip to the planet. And so they did a TED Talk with him. And then there's a website of his company, and you can go on here. I mean, it's exhaustive. So you can go on here, and you can go through here. I would argue that there's really nothing in here that truly adds to the story, but it builds out the world of like, okay, so this guy owns a company. Let's figure out the different things they're working on and the clients and the careers. It really, again, just builds a world. And then they released a commercial with the robot from Wayland Industries again. So then the new one is obviously Monster University. You know, you have the new upcoming Pixar movie, but they also have, you know, they made a website for the college, so you can, you know, it reads just like a college website. But then they also, during the BCS National Football Game, they ran a college commercial for Monster University. And it's extremely creative and clever, and it's selling the world to the audience. I argue that you would never learn anything about really character development through there, but again, it's making you feel that this world is a living, breathing thing that actually exists. And it's important because you buy that world before you go into the movies, before you do anything else. It gets the viewer really hungry about the story that is going to be told, or the many stories that could be told. So I've just given you a lot of examples of these like multi-$100 million projects. But if you're a small studio or an artist looking to take that next step and trying to innovate with storytelling, where do you go? And so at Cloud Kid, we're a team of about 12 full-time artists. We've been as big as 20. We're about 12 right now. And we really try to experiment with the types of content that we try to make. And every client project is different, but we try to push these different things in different ways. So again, Fizzy's Lunch Lab, I co-created it with Evan Sussman. And we had never done anything interactive, and so Matt came on board, my business partner, to help us figure out the interactive side. But the Lunch Lab, to give you an idea, is this big website that has literally over 100 videos. And this is important because we have, you know, there's short videos about nutrition and food, 1 to 5 minutes. So we have the adventures that are much more about the entire cast of characters, and these are about 5 minutes long. Then we have these 1 to 2 minute segments where the Lunch Lab turns into this, late night TV show, and he interviews characters about all sorts of different things. Here he's interviewing white and wheat bread. Then we have Freezer Burn music videos, they're the house band. Then we have Corporal Cup's food camp. She walks us through our recipes creation. Then we have Mixie Reports. Mixie kind of goes through our real world and interviews people about food and all sorts of different things. And so it's important because the way we're designing this is we have lots of different types of content. They're only 2 minutes long, but we're building out the entire cast. It's not like we're just saying, okay, we're just gonna produce 20-minute adventures. We're like, no, let's play with format. Let's do a short with Corporal Cup where she focuses on one element, or Sully the Cell, or all the different characters have a chance to shine, and you get to meet all these amazing characters. Because we're a web series, we're really playing with format of not just like, okay, these are just usual episodes. We're getting to meet all the characters. And we do that too with our games. So there's tons of games on our site. And I'm going to show this one first because why this is a good example. Again, this property is much more about world building than telling a story over different media. And Escape from Greasy World, I'll show you a quick clip. The Lunch Lab, 98% of the Lunch Lab takes place inside the Lunch Lab. So what we decided to do for this really big interactive game, we had a brainstorm and somebody said, we see the Lunch Lab every day. Why don't we get to go inside Fast Food Freddy's world, which is Greasy World? It's Fast Food Freddy's, Fizzy's Nemesis. So we produced this really large game where the entire game takes place there. So this is a little trailer.
Professor Fizzy?
Professor Fizzy?
Hey, Lunch Labbers! I need your help! Greasy World rules!
Fast Food Freddy! Well, let's put these pieces back together.
So it's a mystery. You have to find out wherever, what happened, and it leads you to Greasy World. So you put together a robot, and he takes you to Greasy World, and the whole game takes place
The
there.
greasiest theme park on the planet!
Let's make a plan.
So the entire world is just this disgusting place made with all different types of sugary. It's kind of McDonald's on speed and steroids. So all the games take place. They're different riffs on this world. So you get the idea. So, but what we did was we wanted to go in and see all the different elements of the world within Greasy World. So we got like the things like the factory where he makes his food, and the arcade with, kind of these fast food games in it, and really playing up that world that it's bigger than Fizzy's kitchen in that world. So then we also have recipes, and this is important because every single piece of video has a recipe associated with it. So what we're doing is making cooking part of that kind of really transmedia experience. And how do you do that? Well, there's nothing more hands-on to actually, once you watch an episode, to then print a recipe and then take that and make it in your house, and you taste it. It's about senses, and that's what I would say to new, media people that are trying to make content, is try to make content that can touch on all the senses, not just visual, not just your vision and your hearing, which a lot of content is doing right now. So then, things like build your own kitchen, and I'm going to just go through this, but we connect content by monthly themes. So we have, and this is, again, Transmedia. It's about building a world, but it's also about building out a theme around a topic. So this is a monthly theme on, smart food choices. So it's about kind of shopping the U, going shopping, and all the good foods are usually on the outside. So that's an adventure. That's a 5-minute short. But then we get, the Lunch Lab Live segment is Fizzy is interviewing a packet of oatmeal who's having an identity crisis. She says, Professor, I don't know who I am. And he said, I know who you are, let's find out. And he says, you're made out of all these things. And so he checks her nutrition label and the ingredients. And then we have one, Freezer Burn World Tour, where they go and you learn about all the different Taste Bud World Tour, where you learn about all the different foods all over the world. And then we did a game, again, connected to the idea of the supermarket, where you have to go around the game. It's kind of all around the supermarket, kind of like a board game. And you get these kind of pop-up Freddy's trying to jam nasty food inside your shopping cart. So again, this is all connected content, but we're doing it in a way where they're little bite-sized things that really explore themes or explore the world or the characters that make the world feel more believable. So another project that we did, and again, this is an example of a story world that we're trying to build, is Negative Nimbus, which is our first iOS game.
Forecast says rain. Woohoo!
So you can meet Nimbus at negativennimbus.com. But the game, the reason why we made that trailer was only to get people into that world. You know, the world that for the game, the point of the game is you want to rain on the happy flowers, avoid the happy characters. If you rain on the happy characters, you ruin their day, and Nimbus feels really bad about it. And the trailer, what it did was it gave us a way to push into that world, so you can kind of see how all these really weird characters kind of cohabitate. And once seeing that and then playing the game, you kind of get it right away. And it just kind of helps build that world out a little bit more. So other things that we're doing to try to innovate, but trying to, again, we're not a huge studio, we don't have millions of dollars. We made comics that were unlockable. So as you do better in the game, you unlock different comics. So this is, a good example of the sense of humor of the world, where we can kind of meet these different characters without having to, produce all these big expensive animated shorts. For what it is right now, we can still talk about character and motivation and really bring the world to life through these really weird, funny comics. Then we have a website where you can meet all the different characters if you go into the World tab. And then we did something again where it's like, okay, let's just try it. And we made a weather app with all the Nimbus characters. So the idea is that we get our weather every day from talking heads and from characters, weathermen. So why not have the Nimbus characters give you your weather? And again, this was this took us about a week to do. We did it very quickly. There's a bunch of different illustrations, little funny sayings, but again, trying to connect everybody's idea to weather in Nimbus and make that connection that, okay, oh, it's rainy out, oh, maybe Nimbus is above, So again, trying to find ways to connect the character to story to some sort of emotional reaction. Again, there's some additional little ones. So this has changed the way we think about everything. So this is a project that we're actually in negotiations with a major network to produce a digital only. So what that means is it's not on TV, and it starts as an interactive project. And it basically is about this kid who runs this essentially alien relocation program. And he takes in this alien, and there's all this additional content, these alien files, and kind of like you have to take care of this alien, and all this additional content that puts you in the driver's seat, very similar to what our main character has to do to run this organization. And that's how we're thinking about every single thing that we're doing, is really not thinking about it as, okay, this is a TV show. It's, well, how can we make something that could be a TV show but has really natural ways of engaging the audience to make them feel like they're a bigger part of the world. So the final project that unfortunately I can't show, but I just wanted to talk to, so Ozmat is a project that we've been working on for the last 6 months or so. It's a live action web series that we independently financed. This is very much a transmedia story. A lot of the work that we've done up to this point, or all of it, has been much more in the world building, where this is the narrative literally takes place over a variety of content. Is that it takes place inside a secret government agency, and the main character is submitting his research to the government, and we see that research that he submitted. So the story unfolds through a variety of different types of media. And we hope that Ozmat is the place where media in the future can really go, and that people aren't just thinking about, well, you have this one story over here that's the big story, and then you have these kind of ancillary stories, but why can't a story from the get-go have all these different pieces of media along the way? And it's a challenge that I think as storytellers, we need to take bigger risks, and I think as fine artists too, finding ways that we can all say, I don't need to make an animated series, or I need to make this big, profound piece of work, or these big things. You can write a comic, but then have a certain way that people find it, or using music in comics, or finding ways that you're bridging the gap with other artists and skill sets away from just thinking of yourself as an illustrator or an animator or a designer. And just in closing, the challenge with transmedia going forward is, how do you monetize this outside? How do you finance it? How do you monetize it without a big television budget or film budget? And it's a challenge. The other challenge is that to produce these things takes a really skilled group of people, because you need programmers, you need writers, you need artists, you need filmmakers. And so again, one of the things that we really preach at CloudKit, and we've written blog posts on it, is really killing the notion of the individual artist, and really finding ways that you guys can reach out to your friends, your colleagues, people you admire, and find ways to collaborate in really unique ways that aren't being handled right now. There's, everybody has a lot of experience in their field, but start bridging connections to innovate in different areas. Because it's easy if people just take risks, and they can be small risks, but just that's how we've grown CloudKit's, taking lots of small risks and then being able to take bigger risks. So in closing, what the heck has this guy been gabbing about? So it's not just cross-platform, story and or world-building content in a variety of formats. It's not just marketing for movies, TV shows, and video games. And really thinking about leveraging, the sim model, leveraging the best media to tell the best story. And the benefits, really expanding the world, building the narrative and the backstory, getting to know secondary characters. That's really important, because our world is filled with all different types of characters. And tease what happens when the cameras are off. I think that's really exciting. And then play with the senses and take risks. So, I like to say this because I think our 9-year-old selves are a little bit more adventurous, but knowing the technology that exists today, what would you create for your 9-year-old self? So, now go make it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Dave. Do questions and then we'll switch it out.
Okay.
Do some questions and then we'll switch it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Questions?
I really liked your definition of transmedia and how it's not just cross-platform, and it's really about world building. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunity to bring this into industries outside of entertainment and education. And I'm just imagining, an insurance company or the banking industry, which is becoming so complex, trying to explain these ideas to people in ways where they can connect.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I think sometimes we're like, oh, we're storytellers, but you're communicators. So you're telling a story if you're selling insurance or talking about banking or whatever else. And so I think that's exactly right. I think approaching all sorts of different problems in a way that's multifaceted and not just, one way that we're so used to just consuming things.
As you're moving out to the unknown of these different medias, you're also working with a demographic that unfortunately you're not a part of anymore. You're not a 9-year-old kid.
Sure.
Are you doing focus groups? Are you doing research? Are you talking to that audience as you're expanding?
So one of the things, OzMat, first of all, is actually, it's more of a general audience project. But in terms of Nimbus and the other stuff, we do focus, not necessarily focus groups, but we do play testing. So we have relationships with, Boys and Girls Club and JP and the YMCA down the street and all over Brighton and Boston. We have relationships where every game we create, we bring into schools it's not really schools, but it's after school programs, and get feedback from kids. You have to. It's awesome.
Do you know of any examples where someone outside the original creators created something because of the backstory that was expanded on?
That's a good question. I mean, you look at YouTube and there's tons of it. A lot of the YouTube response videos, there's tons of user-generated content that's based on additional shorts. I'll give you an example. So I've been, in preparation for this, I was thinking a lot about, in some ways I was going to joke with H.H. Richardson. We could create a movie right now about H.H. Richardson that involves a whole mythology that we've never known about him. In some ways, which actually got me thinking about Lincoln. So, people write tons of books on Lincoln, and those are in some ways transmedia because you're getting the Lincoln story from a different perspective. And then you get Steven Spielberg's movie, you have, you have the new documentary, I think, that's just coming out for, I think, HBO, and then you have Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. So it's it's a really exciting time that you can even take historical figures and look at that as transmedia of ways to approach how you're telling that story. It's exciting.
One more question?
So I'm wondering, you talked a little bit about creating the recipes so that we can begin to develop the world with other senses. And I wonder if perhaps the definition of transmedia, does it stop when it enters into the physical world? When do you start creating content that we start physically touching? Is it not then transmedia? I mean, it starts becoming branding, basically, when you think about Pepsi, and Pepsi creating all these different worlds and stories beyond just the drink, right? I mean, that's what branding is all about cross-platform. But I'm wondering, did you experience or have any projects where you started entering into the physical space, like, say, comics or play toys or actual plays that were made from these stories? Or is that not transmedia in your opinion?
I think it's a good question. I think that I look at all the different facets of that we experience with life. And so, you have a neighborhood, right? The way that you experience a story every day in your own life. You have, I wake up, or I did this, and you kind of go through your life. And if I were to look at your life, I could get a sense of your day, but I could talk to the person you live with to get your morning routine. Then I can talk to your boss and understand that. And so I think finding ways to approach storytelling that's much more about those unique interactions that you have every day, and really trying to blur that line between experience and narrative. And I think that, the physical world is how we experience life. So making storytelling best a part of that, I think, should happen. And that's why I think it's important to tell stories over different platforms.
Great. Well, thank you, Dave.